Welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, coming to you every week from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful ice of the Galactic Empire. Join your hosts, John Mark Tolley, Garrett K. Jones, and Brian Karasik, as they discuss the various facets of the saga's lore, characters, review the films, and discuss every tidbit of news coming out of Lucasfilm. And remember, this isn't just my Star Wars, this isn't just your Star Wars, this is our Star Wars.
Hello and welcome again to the latest edition of the War of the Stars podcast. And for those of you, a happy belated Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
It's Revenge of the Fifth.
No. There's always a bigger fifth.
What's that?
There's always a bigger fifth.
There's always a bigger fifth.
Oh, I like that.
And
Tomorrow's Revenge of the Sixth.
Revenge of the Sixth. I've heard both ways. I'll take anything.
And then on Wednesday we can say that we are the 7th.
Did you guys do anything to observe the day?
I slept, to be honest.
I wore that Darth Vader shirt I showed you guys.
Yeah.
That button up. It actually I lost some weight, so it actually fit a little bit better. It was very nice, very breezy.
I went to a local bottle shop where they had a Star Wars themed trivia contest, and my team name was Darthritis, which was fun. And I came in second on account of not knowing what planet Mon Mothma is from.
Chandrilla.
Well, where were you guys yesterday? But yeah,
hey,
that was
nobody gave me a call for their phone a friend.
That was the only one I missed. I knew what species Watto was. I knew what species the boss, not Boss Nass. Shoot, I forget the name they used, but it was one of the Dougs.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew what planet the Death Star was constructed on initially, Geonosis. And I was pretty pleased with one question, which was, check me on this, guys.
Yeah.
How many Sith Lords are mentioned or seen in the films?
Ooh.
And my answer was 5.
4.
Let's see.
Sidious, Maul, Tyrannus, Vader, and Plagueis, who is not seen but is mentioned.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's 5.
Oh, yeah.
I got that wrong because they said the answer was 6.
Who's the 6th one?
100 at this point. I'm like 100%. They are counting General Grievous, and I said, "I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a Star Wars fan here, but can we pause and let me hear what 6 Sith Lords there are? Because if I'm missing one, I need to know." Sure enough, General Grievous was counted as a Sith Lord, and I said,
"He's not a Sith Lord.
He's not a Sith Lord. He was never anointed by the Sith Master as an apprentice. He is not Force sensitive, and he doesn't even use a red lightsaber. He is not a Sith."
Yeah.
And the guy goes, "Are you sure?" Because, and I said, it's funny, actually, General Grievous was a Kalish warlord long before he ever had a catastrophic starship crash that resulted in the full cyborg conversion. Some say that Darth Sidious engineered the crash because he wanted Darth Tyrannus to have a second in command who had lightsaber skills, but no actual true force. So he would be a solid lieutenant, but no threat to the actual supremacy of the Sith. And someone in the back goes, "Just give it to him."
Nerd!
Exactly. But the guy who knew Mon Mothma was from Chandrilla had me beat. I was like, I bow to a skill far defter than my own.
So, fun fact.
I had my lightsaber, though, so it was fun. And again, Darthritis was a lot of fun.
Fun fact, when I was first dating my ex-wife, she's a big Star Wars fan. She actually has the Star Wars Trivial Pursuit, but it's geared off of just the original trilogy. And so we played around with her, her sister, her niece, who was actually Skyping in from Oregon at the time. And like they were cheating, like they were passing cards to each other, like they were using the internet to search up answers and text answers to each other. I still got all 6 of my wedges. They could, like, I was going on like 20 question streaks without missing one.
Right. That's good. I was asked once at
like
work,
them.
what is the name of the animal that attacks Luke on Hoth?
Wampa.
And I said Wampa, of course. And like, no, I think that's the one they ride on. I was like, are you really gonna
No,
fuck
that's
with
the
me about this?
Tauntaun.
Like, there's a reason you asked me this question, right? Right. But yeah, going into the pre-cyborg history of General Grievous as his history as a Kalish warlord, yeah, that kind of settled it. Well, happy May 4th, happy May 5th, and to all those who celebrate Orthodox and Reformed. Let's get into it. What do we got today?
Yes.
We are talking about the Imperial Remnant.
Yes, indeed. I think for this conversation, we kind of need to almost, in my mind at least, kind of break it into two discussions. One is the canon version of what happens to the Empire, and then Legends, because I think they're both kind of interesting in their own ways, and to see the divergence and how each changed the story, whether for the better or for the worse, which one we like. And I'll be honest, I don't really know a ton about the new canon version. I know a little bit, like I've heard mention of Operation Cinder, the Battle of Jakku, all of that stuff, but we'll probably have to rely on Brian here. But I definitely know quite a bit about the Legends, because that's kind of what I grew up reading, was
Right.
the Legends books and everything like that. So
well, let's start with those guys, because let's go in chronological release order.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well, I mean, the first thing obviously, if you were reading the books back in the mid to early 90s, the first book you would have read would have been the Thrawn trilogy, and that would have been.
Did that begin with Heir to the Empire?
It began with Heir to the Empire. Now, if you're going in chronological order with the books as to when they take place, then you're going to start with the Truce at Bakura, which is immediately after Battle of Endor. Like, they're still on Endor when they get the call from Baku that they need Imperial help because they're under attack.
Yeah. And well, so yeah, so we've got. It's kind of a weird thing, because like you've got a couple different versions of the Imperial Remnant. You've got the section that Thrawn is a part of. Yeah.
Well, initially, what you have is so Thrawn comes later. Initially, you have characters like Yazin Izard, the director of Imperial Intelligence. You have Zinij, I think. What's that?
You also have Rowan Fell in the Fell Empire.
Yeah, you have all of these different warlords that come up, rise up, and kind of at the beginning, what you have is like this kind of battle between two different factions. You have Zinij, I can't remember how, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, who basically controls the fleet, and then Izard, who puts up a puppet emperor, but basically is controlling things behind the scene, but who controls Coruscant.
That is the female with the black and white hair, is that right?
Yes, she's the director of Imperial Intelligence.
I met a cosplayer of that character in Chicago.
There was also I'm sorry, I had the wrong name. The same last name, but the character's name is Jagged Fell. He shows up after Jason and Jaina Solo are in their teens, and
that's
way later.
I gotta tell you, some of the names of the tertiary characters in this saga just are a real swing and a miss.
Yeah, well, it's interesting with the Izard. Her nickname is Iceheart because she was so dedicated to the Empire that she even had her own father horribly murdered and executed because he wasn't quite up to. It didn't quite meet the criteria for Imperial loyalty.
Well, she's a patriot.
Yes, she definitely was. and also one of many supposed lovers of Palpatine.
Yeah, the cosplayer I met actually had a fairly inappropriate suggestion for a photo op.
Oh,
I did
That's-
not take her up on it.
yeah. I was
It's probably for the best.
I don't think anybody wants naked Palpatine to be in canon.
no.
See?
No, not even when before he turned all shrivelly, when he was just kindly, not even then.
Yeah, I feel like he was born looking like that. You know, like at 4 years old, he's like, "Now look, it's my turn with the tetherball. Everyone step back."
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's imagine being a kid growing up on Naboo and everyone's like, "Hey, there's, Sheev. Wait, isn't that the kid that always looks like a raisin?"
He was actually kind of a ne'er-do-well in his youth, according to the Darth Plagueis novel. He was responsible for
a future
speeder-related deaths of a few people.
A future Sith
He wasn't a Sith Lord at the time.
ne'er-do-well?
He was just a jerk.
That's why I said a future Sith Lord and ne'er-do-well. Really?
He toyed with a speeder racing career.
Yeah. The one thing, I mean, as much as I love the old Legends novels, I will say it did fall into, after a while, kind of a predictable trap. A warlord would rise up. They kind of threaten the New Republic. The New Republic would, wonder like, oh, are you going to defeat this guy or this, woman or whoever it was? The warlord would be put down. Everybody would be happy for a while. Then another warlord would come up. Oh no! All right, no, here we go.
A lot of them kind of reminded me of Voltron, where like, let's try fighting him with the lions. That didn't work. Form Voltron. Fight him some more. That didn't quite work either.
Yeah.
Okay, form blazing sword and credits. At what point do we need to call Luke in to solve this problem? Well, I got a little bit, and I don't mean to disrespect the EU novels, but I did get a little bit tired of reading that same story over and over again. Another one that they went back to, another well they visited quite often was Leia is forced to negotiate with some warlord, potentate, whoever, Carnifex, whatever title you want to give him. But Leia is negotiating with them to bring them into the New Republic, and he, of course, develops feelings for Leia, and Han is upset about it. And Leia's mad that Han is jealous and doesn't trust her. And like, really, guys, like 2 or 3 times we see that one. They did get to the point where they were so recycling plots and so unconcerned with what had been done before that Han and Leia get married twice in the EU novels. There's 2 different EU novels that have their wedding.
Well, maybe they're just told from 2 different perspectives, so it feels
like
different
different planets, different events, or a whole different story. Just like, hey, didn't somebody already write this book? They'll buy it.
Yeah.
But back to the Empire.
There were some interesting characters that, great characters that came out of obviously Thrawn, a character that's been brought into the new canon. I really liked Admiral Dala. She was one of my favorite, just a very, very, very cool character, very interesting, and someone who had a long shelf life. Like, she was around for the eventual, surrender of the Empire. Not really even capitulation, but surrender. But
yeah,
and then she became when it kind of morphs into the Galactic Alliance. She at one point becomes head of the Galactic Alliance, which is basically a combination of the old Empire and the New Republic that kind of merge into one after the Vaughn War.
I really enjoy a similar character in the new canon is Admiral Ray Sloan.
Yes. Yeah.
Which one is he?
She's introduced in A New Dawn as Lieutenant Sloan, and then we see her rise to essentially Grand Admiral status. She is a woman of color, and she's a brilliant strategist.
Okay. I know
she's competent without being Thrawn's level of Harry Potter competence, where nothing he does ever goes wrong or fails in any way, and he's never actually in any danger. I would love to see her on screen and played by Aisha Tyler.
As in Ron from the movies or Ron from the books? Because portrayals are very different.
Yeah.
Harry.
Ron from the books does make mistakes.
Harry, not Ron.
No.
Who? What?
Thrawn. Who are we talking about?
I'm talking about Harry
I thought you
Potter.
said Ron and
Oh.
Harry, and I'm thinking I switched
Thrawn.
gears to
Sorry, Thrawn.
Thrawn.
I call him the Harry Potter of Star Wars because he, in every chapter of his novels, he learns something in the beginning of the chapter that only he is able to put to use by the end of that chapter. And at no point is he ever actually in danger of. In fact, Harry Potter is in more danger than Thrawn ever is. It's fine. I enjoy the Thrawn books, but I do enjoy.
That's because Thrawn is
Grousing about
actually
him.
protected by plot armor.
Yes. Oh yeah. The best.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, when we get to the new canon, I have a bit of a line on that.
Yeah.
But so tell me.
I mean, eventually the Empire. Go ahead. Sorry.
Who is the Crimson Guardsman, the Imperial Guard, who kind of goes out on his own? Is that Kyle Katarn? There was a
no.
There was a comic series of an Imperial Guard who not so much maintains.
I think I know you're talking. No, it wasn't Kyle. Yeah, but you want to talk about a character who was for that time period was the Harry Potter of Star Wars. Kyle Katarn for a while was like the greatest Jedi who ever lived, could do anything, was the perfect Jedi. And it was like you said with a lot of the video game characters, they have to be perfect.
Kir Kanos.
Yeah.
Who ended up killing Karnor Jax, who is a Imperial Sovereign Protector and aspiring Sith Lord.
It's interesting to see all those factions and warlords rise, because by the end of the Empire, it was essentially, I mean, it started out that way, but it really, by the end of his reign, the entire Empire was just warring factions of, maybe not warring, but competing factions of people who basically just thought that they were going to butter up the Emperor better.
Yeah.
Right. So once he's gone, there's no metric. There's no way to determine your success with the Empire.
That's why it was as a matter of these strong men who could, for a short time, could kind of rise up and kind of unite all the different factions, even if it's just for a short time.
Yeah.
And you need.
I'm really looking forward to that part of our nation's history.
Yeah. You need almost either like a strong personality like a Thrawn who can kind of hold them together. But at the end, basically what you have is all these different Moffs who think they're in power, but it's really, I mean, they even say it at one point in one of the books that it's whoever controls the Navy, the Imperial Navy controls the Empire.
Sure.
And in the end, that turns out to be Pelayan.
Well, and the other thing is, I would suggest that whoever he or she who holds the purse strings controls the Empire, because it doesn't matter how much control you have over the Navy, if you can't pay your troops, if you can't feed your troops, they will rebel against you, and they will go to the leadership of whoever can. You see this happen with Rome. When during the battles with the Visigoths, when Roman lines were running short on supplies and rations because the Visigoths were killing their supply lines, what did the Romans do? They turned around and they walked off. It's not it's not uncommon. So I mean, it's kind of crazy, like how much infighting goes into play here, and really what it really comes down to is who's signing the paychecks.
Yeah.
As a Navy supply clerk, I can attest to that.
Now, that brings me to another point, though, because like I'm probably jumping ahead onto the new canon and stuff, but it's like, how is it? I mean, like, granted, I'm sure that the fragment of the First Order had some connection to the money lines that were left over from the Galactic Empire, but how was it in 30 years nobody in the New Republic or any other faction fighting against the the Galactic Empire said, "Hey, why don't we freeze their accounts? Why don't we hack their funds? Like, how come that wasn't done? That would have stalled anything that they had available to them."
Valid question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again,
Probably because there were people within the New Republic who supported the
First Order.
And so
Yeah,
they
but
blocked any.
Let's just think about this from a completely imperial standpoint. I mean, you'd have to have the GDP of pretty much an entire solar system or galaxy, sure, in order to fund this entire war machine. And they, the First Order did not have a central seat of government. They were completely mobile. Unless you count Exegol as their base of operations, but even then, more than half the fleet didn't even know the rest of it existed.
Yeah.
So it just leaves me wondering who's paying all these people.
Well, it's hard to get into Star Wars economics with an earthbound mindset, because bear in mind we are considering an economy where a teenager sells his first used car in exchange for the price of intergalactic transport. Right? Like if I could have traded in my '76 Mustang to leave the solar system, it's hard to predict. And also, I think there's something to be said for within the Imperial construct, they're using galactic credits, which are worth as much as the Galactic Empire says they are. And also to that extent, like you're a stormtrooper, you're stationed on the Death Star. Everything that you eat, sleep, or consume in any way is provided to you by the Empire. And the Empire, when they need more resources, will hollow out a planet to get it. So I agree that in the real world, the pay scale might be of a concern, but I'm just trying to think when a stormtrooper would get leave to go spend personal money on something.
So
we really need that stormtrooper series. Was it Bash and
Tag and Bink?
Tag and Bink, thank you. Yeah, we really need that Tag and Bink series.
So in Legends, the Galactic Civil War was finally brought to an end by what it says is the Palayan Gaverson Treaty. It ended the long, bitter Galactic Civil War between the New Republic until Imperial Remnant, signed by Imperial Supreme Commander Gilead Palayan and New Republic Chief of State Ponik Garverson. The treaty marked the end of the cessation of open hostilities and set the stage for a new era of uneasy peace in the galaxy. Its terms were designed to curb the military resurgence of the Remnant, including specific restrictions such as banning on cloaking devices, and provided that individual star system under either government could choose their allegiance, thereby reorganizing the diverse political landscape of the post-war galaxy.
Makes sense.
So each system was able to choose whether they wanted to remain part of the Empire and join the Republic, or remain part of the New Republic or join the Empire.
Seems nice as a win-win.
What other bans were put on in place, as far as I'm sure they were like the New Republic probably would have put in bans on the number of production of Star Destroyers that could be built, how many stormtroopers they could have, and
how many black cloaks any Force users allowed at one point.
Yeah. Well, cloaking devices were completely banned in this.
No, black cloaks.
Devices, black cloaks.
Oh, yes.
That's the number one indication that someone is turning to the dark side is they start wearing black outfits.
Hey! Whoa! There's a certain son of a former Dark Lord who exclusively wore a black cloak, and he did not turn to the dark side.
That's a really interesting wardrobe choice. Have you read about that? How, like in Return of the Jedi, when Luke is on the Death Star, he's in the black suit with the white underneath it. That's nice.
Oh yeah, he opened the collar so that everybody knew he was really good all along. Because it was, it's the friends you make along
Jedi.
the way.
They're color coded for your convenience. I always thought it would be interesting to see a Sith. Like if you're really going to be a Sith and you really want to be undercover. How about maybe get a yellow lightsaber, right? Like as soon as Darth Maul pops that red lightsaber, the whole Jedi Order is like, oh, the Sith are back. All Maul had to do was like not wear black and not use a red saber. They'd just be like, oh, some rogue with a lightsaber, no big deal.
Yeah,
I got a whole bit about where evil people go for their wardrobe and for their construction costs. Like, who is building these skull-shaped fortresses?
Who's it? Oh crud! What's the league from Super Friends?
Oh,
Oh,
the Legion of Doom.
The Legion of Doom.
Yeah,
Legion
Legion
of Doom.
Come on,
Yeah.
Lex Luthor. The guy's a billionaire, multi-billionaire.
He can afford skull-shaped submerging fortresses. I agree.
I think the only I want to call it show or that has a skull-shaped object that people are in that is not owned or controlled by the bad guys is He-Man with Castle Grayskull.
I think that's good. Yeah,
you might be right. You might be right because like the Robeast and Voltron, their coffins were marked with skulls.
Yeah.
Although Skeletor himself was a skull, so
Skull. Yes.
He was always going to have a bad hair day.
I remember reading something with Skeletor in it, and it made me, especially you'll get this, Brian, being a fellow Gen Xer. It showed like three characters. I can't remember who they are. They're talking about their feelings, and it's like one of them was supposed to be the boomers, like you push your feelings down. The millennial was like, you need to talk about your feelings, and the Gen Z was just crying, and the Gen Xer was like, you guys have feelings.
Which is, of course, a reference to a Meet the Millers scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. I met a really, I wish I'd seen her since, but I met a really good Skeletor cosplayer in Chicago who was Skeletor, but a Sith assassin Skeletor. So like It was the Sith assassin outfit, but with the Skeletor coloring. Really nice.
All right. Well, Brian, why don't you, since you seem to know a little bit more about the new canon, kind of go over the brief history of the Imperial Remnant and what happens to the Empire post Return of the Jedi in the new Disney canon.
By all means. You mentioned earlier, Mark, and it's important to mention, the first step of the Imperial Remnant is what we call Operation Cinder, which was a plan put in place by Palpatine prior to his death, which was the orbital bombardment onto ash of a number of major planets within the Empire, essentially to punish the Empire for not keeping him safe. His plan, his deal was, if the theory was if the Empire can't protect its Emperor, then the Empire doesn't deserve to exist. So
what's interesting is you see that throughout even real history. I mean, you see, Saddam Hussein lighting the fire, burning the oil fields during the first Gulf War. Hitler,
if I can't have it, no one can. Philosophy.
Or sorry, YouTube. Funny German Austrian mustache man had similar plans in place during the Second World War.
Sure.
It's kind of part and parcel.
It's a common mindset in that sort of person who says that if I can't have this, then nobody can have it. So right. Naboo was one of those targeted, by the way. Naboo was supposed to be raised to glass, and it was stopped by Admiral Ray Sloan, by the way, who put a stop to it by defeating Fleet Admiral Gallius Rax. After that, the remaining troops and fleet of the Empire were directed to head into the unknown territory and essentially disappear. And so we see a lot of I think the first on-screen appearance of the Imperial Remnants post-Palpatine is in The Mandalorian, when we meet the client, Werner Herzog, amazing, and of course Moff Gideon. So these are in the same vein as we see in the EU. These are powerful people within the Empire who got real comfortable being powerful.
Yeah.
And as we see now, there were people, we see it in the Aftermath trilogy, there are people who were fascinated by the existence of the Galactic Empire, people paying huge amount of money for like this was a genuine Imperial Guard helmet. It was worn in the presence of Palpatine, and like they're marking up red helmets because they were in the same room as Palpatine. And with that kind of hero worship of an objective villain, I mean, even McDiarmid himself refers to Palpatine as one of the most despicable characters in science fiction, if not all of fiction. So with that mindset, yeah, of course, there's going to be people left over. I thought it was interesting to see, and we see it elsewhere as well. But first, again, in The Mandalorian, we see these stormtroopers who have clearly like run out of white armor polish. You know, they're like they're going through the motions, but they're not shiny anymore.
Yeah,
their armor's chipped, it's worn, it's dusty, it's gone a matte finish in some cases. You know, you just don't they don't have the resources, like Eric was mentioning, to maintain the standards.
So
and
tell us what. So one of the things I remember hearing about was, like the final was the final battle was Battle of Jakku, right? Before the Galactic Concordance were signed.
Yep.
That was basically the Empire throwing everything it had left in one basket for one final.
Right. Do as much damage as possible, and everybody who survives get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, we learned later that where they went was Exegol.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a fan film that I watched, and it was going into the Battle of Jakku. But it's these it's about 4 or 5 stormtroopers, and they're in a drop ship ready to go down to the surface to fight, and each one is giving their reason for why they joined up. And each one is different. Like one is like, oh, I went for the adventure. One was like, well, I needed a paycheck. Another one was like,
couldn't find a job after high school.
Yeah. Another one was like, oh, I love the Empire. Yeah, raw patriotism. And they asked the last one, and he was, young, looked like he was kind of younger. They asked him like, well, why did you join? And he said, my brother was on the second Death Star. I'm like, ooh.
Well, if you haven't read the books, people would assume from the end of Return of the Jedi that the death of Palpatine was the end of the Empire. But the Empire continued for a year after that. The Battle of Jakku was in 5 ABY.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing that that for a while they even tried to put, hush up that the Emperor had died.
Yep,
they tried to, make it seem like everything's just normal because, as you can even see, I don't know if you guys have been watching Andor, and it's something that they kind of hint at in Bad Batch 2, that the Emperor just kind of disappeared. Like, you didn't see Palpatine.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't show up at the Senate.
He's a ghost.
It's mentioned in Lost Stars that he continues to communicate with the Empire, but he does so via holovids. And they are filtered so that he looks the way he looked in episode 1.
Yeah.
So, and that's the female protagonist of Lost Stars sees him on Death Star 2 when he arrives. She's in that room. She's in that hangar when he arrives. And that's what convinces her to leave the Empire. Because seeing him, feeling what is described as the palpable waves of evil coming off of him, she realizes it's all been a lie. Like, has this gentle, avuncular sort of grandfather that has been speaking to the Empire for 20 years is not who stands before her. And it's a shocking moment for her.
He used a filter that made him look as he did in Phantom Menace.
The book doesn't say in Phantom Menace, but it describes him, and it describes him as being the scarring and deformation is not present.
Which is interesting because he gave a public address from the Senate floor in Revenge of the Sith, describing the scars and all that. It's like, if he's supposed to be this martyr that they've allowed to rise to power, why wouldn't he flaunt that? Like,
he was not so much interested in ruling, and even in like the very first novelization of Star Wars,
he just cared about having the power and the control.
Yeah, exactly. And which is why the Imperial apparatus was so shoddy after his death, because you sort of have to have a Sith Lord's ability to manipulate events, to control people, to predict the future, to run that kind of an organization. And the foundation of the Galactic Empire was so that he could end the Jedi and say, now the Sith are in charge. But once the Sith are in charge, like, what's he going to do? He's not like drawing up budgets for Naboo, right? He's the Emperor. He's the boss. Everybody orders him up all day long.
In Legends, one of the things that Thrawn does in the Thrawn trilogy is find Jorah Sabaoth, someone who is a force sensitive, who he could use almost as the same role to use the force power to kind of guide all of these different things and unite everybody. And
I wanted to, you said that I wanted to touch on Thrawn in the new canon, because I have read all the Thrawn novels, and I gotta say I prefer the EU version of Thrawn, but I enjoy them all anyway. But I think it's funny. I used to make a joke on another podcast I used to work on. I would always make a joke that Timothy Zahn was a big fan of the show, and of course he was not. I had no reason to say it. It was an obvious joke. But when the new Thrawn novel came out, Thrawn has an assistant who is from a backwoods planet. His name is Eli Vanto, I think. Yes, Eli Vanto. Growing up in the wild space frontier region, he was raised by his parents on legends of the Chiss. So, Eli Vanto is from a backwater planet. In the audiobook, he is voiced with a southern accent. He is a supply officer in the Imperial Navy. Garrett, watch out. He's a supply officer, and at one point in the first of the new canon Thrawn novels, Eli and Thrawn track down this their nemesis they're trying to seek out. They track him down by noticing and tracking deviations in the Imperial supply chain. Where like there's more of this metals being consumed here than it should be, and it's a statistically significant anomaly, and so they track him down. Guys, I am from the South. I was in supply in the U.S. Navy, and I have a literal medal for doing exactly that, where I tracked down an incongruous consumption rate and fixed it.
What you're saying is we should paint you blue and dye
no, Eli's a human.
Okay. Well, I still think we should paint you blue.
The joke I made there was like, in the next novel, if Eli Vanto becomes a recruiter and then meets a human woman and goes into Starship simulation production, that's it. But I do want to touch on Thrawn, because I think while he has always been protected by plot armor, it bears noting that in the new canon, we meet Thrawn literally barefoot and alone, having been marooned on this distant planet. While barefoot, Thrawn breaks into an Imperial facility, disables a number of stormtroopers, hacks into their comms by removing their helmets and disassembling their communications, and essentially takes over this station. When he allows himself to be captured, because that's the only way they could get him, is if he lets himself be taken prisoner. What is his punishment for this? To be taken directly to an audience with the Emperor, whereupon he is given an assignment to the most prestigious Imperial Navy Academy in the galaxy. He is promoted one rank before he even starts classes, and he's given an attaché in the form of Eli Vanto. It's not the sort of, and time and again in that novel, and less so in later ones, but time and again, he disobeys orders, is sent back to Coruscant for discipline, and comes back with a promotion. And there's no danger he's ever in, and it's almost comical to watch. And he does a little bit of that. Huh?
He's Sergeant Bilko.
Yes, he is, and which is funny. That's what I always said. Some people join the military to be Sergeant Rock. I joined the Navy to be Sergeant Bilko. That was my role model, the hookup guy, the angle guy. But with all that in mind, we see some of that in Rebels when Thrawn is introduced, in that Thrawn does more damage to the Empire by allowing bad leaders to fail. Let's just see what they do, shall we? And then they fail, and now Thrawn looks good because he said that was going to happen or something. Like I really, it's funny to me to kind of think around corners like that, and that Thrawn allowing bad commanders to make mistakes destroys incalculable Imperial assets just to make a point. So, but anyway, back to the Imperial Remnant. They, without the axis of Palpatine on which the Empire would rotate, it immediately fragments into these groups, and they follow a lot of the same script as in the EU. It's just warlord after warlord. Moff Gideon, I think, is the closest to actually forming a strong cohesive center, but it's just like now I'm the new emperor. No, I'm the new emperor, and it's the reason I can't get involved in Sith roleplay Facebook groups. Same thing. Everybody just says they're the emperor, and and what can you do? But I would have loved to have seen more of Werner Herzog's character. I think he made a really interesting foil, and I was interested to see what his background. Well, he leaves the story way too early, but enjoyable. But other than that, like I've read that more recently. That's kind of all I can say. Operation Cinder was a great move. It was announced by a bunch of communications droids that just had like a hologram of Palpatine's face for a head. So like this droid comes up and boom, Palpatine orders you to destroy Naboo. Like, okay, that's seems like a good plan to me.
Yeah.
That's what I got for the EU Imperial Remnant. It comes down to, I think, politically, when you get that many people who are in power, in any level of power, the old saying, power corrupts, but it's also very habit forming. So when we talk about the Palaeon Accords, where we decide whether or not you want to be in the Empire, that's not truly an empire if you're allowed to leave. We need all the resources we could get, and that includes taking over your planet and drilling it full of holes if we need to. And I keep making that reference. In the beginning of A New Dawn, we encounter a planet whose core has been destabilized because the Empire has mined it beyond its capacity to stay together. And that's the sort of thing the Empire does. Like we've got thousands of planets. Why should we preserve yours?
Well, we're seeing that in, and this will kind of move into kind of the next discussion. I want to talk to you guys. If you guys have been watching the second season of Andor, or if you're waiting for them to all drop.
I'm saving it, but don't worry about spoiling me.
Okay. The main crux of it so far has been the Empire trying to get on the planet Gorman, and they talk about how there's this rare mineral that they're trying to get, and they pretty much say that the only way they can get enough, the backstory that the Empire is using, basically they're going to use it to shield the reactor for the Death Star. The cover story is that the Empire has a, how would you describe, what do they say it is? It's
supposed to be like a munitions storage facility.
The big thing, the Emperor's project, his big thing that he's doing is energy. He wants the entire empire to be energy self-sufficient, energy self-sufficiency. And but they say that to get this what mineral that's on this planet, they'll have to strip mine the planet. But the problem is that they said Gorman isn't a world that's like an outer rim world that no one's going to care about. This is a core world. This is one of the core worlds. So you have this group. What are the Imperial propaganda branch, who's slowly putting out this thing of like, those Gorman, they like to keep to themselves, don't they? They're so different. They're just kind of so like little bits like that, and they're like kind of propagate into it so that when they finally do it, they even talk about, and this is something
I'm surprised they're that subtle. I could see them going the other way, just saying there's no such thing as Planet Gorman.
No, they're very subtle, but there was an event in one of the old EU novels where they mentioned Gorman. They mentioned the Gorman massacre, and they even mentioned it in this one. It was Tarkin was coming to expect something, and there was a protest in the city square, and instead
He
of
landed his ship on top of
he
5
landed
people.
his
Yep.
shuttle on top of the protesters, killing thousands of people.
You know they're down there. They're like, band together. He can't kill us all. Oh yes, he can actually.
Yes, he can.
You gave them one target.
Right, spread out.
But
more.
it's interesting because you still got this whole thing that you kind of had in the first season of Andor, where the ISB is purposely fomenting moments like of these sort of different types of rebellions, specifically so they can say, like, see, we need to go in here and clean things up. And they want them to be as unorganized and as shoddy as can be, but still bad enough so that you have the excuse to send in the troops to, yeah.
I mean, it's a smart move, if anything. Like, they've got Imperial agents in those crowds.
Oh yeah,
Hey guys,
yeah.
this protest isn't violent enough yet.
Yeah, and that's what you have. You have the character who was the cop in the first season.
Cyril Karn.
Cyril, he becomes an Imperial agent, and it's kind of interesting because you got Andor and him, and they're almost like the juxtaposition characters of you're seeing two characters being radicalized, but in two completely different ways.
I love that for Andor. I think that's so great how they're approaching that because
he's acting like I'm a rebel spy, but at the same time he's basically a double agent. He's gone to Gorman, in the guise of being some sort of bureaucrat, and he's working undercover for the ISB and going into all of these rebel cell groups as basically I'm really interested in this. I want to know more about this. And even I found really interesting, there's a scene with the last episodes where they're talking to Cyril, this rebel group, and that's very much based on the French Resistance. If you notice that, Garrett, even the language that they speak sounds French.
It sounds French, but there are times where it sounds.
Yeah, it's very weird. But he says, he's like, we have a feeling that Emperor doesn't know what's being done in his name, and they guise it in the form of to Cyril as doing this, you're going to serve the Empire. By exposing what the ISB is doing, you're going to help the Empire by pointing out corruption under the Emperor's nose. All the time, not realizing that the Emperor probably either doesn't care or
doesn't want to
actively part of what's going on.
Palpatine has always been a quintessential evil for the lulz character. And we see it time and again in the Vader comics, where Vader spends multiple issues of a comic book trying to betray Palpatine, only to find out Palpatine has been aware of it all the time and couldn't be prouder. Like, oh, you're doing great. Like, that's if it's bad, if somebody is being deceitful or someone is being damaged as a result of this, Palpatine's all for it. So but he might not know what's being done in his name. That seems unlikely. Yeah. But if it's bad, I think he'd be okay with it.
Yeah. One thing I will say is, as much I've been enjoying it, but it is still very much a very slow paced, very cerebral. Like, it's very, yeah. I mean, what have you thought about it, Garrett, so far?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this because, like, I have been caught up on Andor season 2 and how things are playing out, but with every passing moment, like, I am caring less and less about the series because for a series called Andor, I'm not getting a whole lot of Andor. Don't get me wrong. I am very much enjoying seeing Mon Mothma trade barbs with Krennic. I am digging Genevieve O'Reilly's performance in this show. She is a treasure.
Is Ben Mendelsohn still Krennic, or do they recast it?
Yes, it's
good.
Yes.
However, what is frustrating me is that, like, for example, in the first 3 episodes of the season, like the most action we get from the character of Andor is him stealing the TIE Avenger,
Yeah.
and then using it at the end of season or of the 3rd episode to shoot down those guys in the field, and that's great action. It was great action.
Yeah.
Well shot, well choreographed, well rehearsed. The problem is everything in between that he has nothing to do.
Mhm.
And the most action that we got of him in these 3 episodes was him going to Gorman looking like a pretty boy, which is fine. That he's doing the double agent thing, and then helping Bix get retribution on the dude that tortured her. That's been it. Like he is hardly in a show where his name is stamped on it.
Yeah.
That's like saying you've got a show called The Book of Boba Fett, and Boba Fett spends 5 minutes outside of a tank.
Hey, what are you getting at?
However, it is still much better than some of the stuff that we've gotten in the past.
I will say this: I had a bit of a fanboy giggle at the beginning of the first episode when he's going into the planet and you see it comes up the planet name Sinar, and he's stealing a TIE fighter. I was like, I understand that. I'm like, Sinar fleet system. So I'm like, ooh, we're on Sinar. That, and also when he takes off in the the fact that they are taking off from Yavin 4, because they crash lands on a jungle planet, and as he escapes, he's going over the tree system, the jungle canopy. You see the top of the pyramids going over. I'm like, yes, Yavin.
I mean, it's taking, like, the action is taking a good form, and I like this little build, but it feels like this is something that could have been done, like if they had made it. I mean, so far we've gotten 6 episodes. If it had been two episodes with this kind of build up, because like we spent 3 episodes building up to a stinking wedding. I don't
I think it's hard when you're trying to tell basically almost 3 to 4 different stories. It's almost like you're trying to tell Mothma's story. You're trying to tell Cyril's story, then Andor's story, and then all these other characters, and it's you're again. I mean, I think you kind of had the same problem with Book of Boba Fett, and even to a more example, I think it would be a 3rd season of The Mandalorian, where it turns out to be more of a group story where it's not just one character. It's
then call it something else. Don't name it after one particular character and have the focus not be on that character. That's like that's. I mean, again, going back to Book of Boba Fett, that's a great example of what not to do. I mean, we have a show named after one of the most popular characters from the EU outside of the main characters, and he is getting 0 recognition for doing anything. He's a passenger in his own show.
Yeah, I think a better name for this would have been maybe Star Wars Rebellion, because you're seeing or even Rise of the Rebellion, because you're seeing basically that's what we're seeing is the rise of the rebellion.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in the first season you could see more of Andor, like it was very Andor folk.
Yeah, it was incredibly Andor centric.
Yeah.
But like I don't know. Like I said, I'm probably.
It'll be interesting to see if they finally bring these characters together. Like if that's what they're going for, is to have, because so far as I know, has Andor met. I know he's met. What's his name? The guy who's basically his handler.
Luthen.
But has he met Mon Mothma yet?
I don't think so, because
I wonder if that's kind of what they're leaning towards, is sort of a meeting of all of the.
it might be because by the time we get to the end of this season, Andor is going to be, he's going to be part of the full military arm of the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing is that it's supposed to end exactly where Rogue One starts.
Right.
That is it's going to lead them right up to the beginning of Rogue One.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's weird, but let's we kind of drifted off the rails here, talking about the Imperial Remnant.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting for me is just the full scope of the, you can clearly see the travesties and the horrible things that the Empire has done throughout its existence prior to the events of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
And it's all 30 years later, all the a great case in point is General Hux. General Hux can be no older than 35 when we are first introduced to him in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's in his 30s to 40s, which means his rise through the ranks went pretty quick. He went to some kind of OCS. He did very, very well.
Well, his father was a Imperial. His dad was an Imperial leader.
Right, and so he was probably banking on that notoriety.
The name, yeah.
But my point is growing up and learning about this, and unless he's completely indoctrinated by his family, which it probably seems like he is, it's even his speeches are reminiscent of a certain early 20th century Austrian dictator. And it's dude, you have to be, you've got to be more self-aware that you are sounding like the bad guy.
Speaking of which, have you seen the thing where they play the Hux speech from Force Awakens in English and underneath it's in German?
And in German, it just sounds more German.
Yes.
There was a comic strip some years ago where it was two German troops standing outside of the Austrian dictator's office, and suddenly there's a rift in space, and this guy in a funny spacesuit jumps out and says, "At last!" and points a gun at them, and they shoot him dead. And then they take his body and they chuck it on this pile of other bodies in spacesuits. And one of the guys is like, with all these time travelers coming back to try to kill him, do you think we might be the bad guys?
Right. There's got to be some self-awareness here.
Well, that's something that I've always enjoyed seeing. We don't see enough of it, I think, of people who are in the Empire for good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody joins the Empire because they are a Tarkin or a Palpatine or a Vader. People join the Empire because it did bring order and peace to parts of the galaxy, while other parts of the galaxy paid a terrible price for it. So, and that's not something that people were aware. There's just, the Empire is vast, is so vast that there are people who are good people who are serving the Empire because all they know is the good things the Empire does.
Yeah.
Right. But case in point, you're stationed on the Death Star. You're stationed on a project that is literally named Death Star.
That's a red flag. I grant you.
How can you granted the people who were working on the Death Star both times did not survive it, but there's got to be a point where you're just sitting there going, we work on a space station designed to kill entire planets. We can.
And have you noticed all of our helmets look like skulls, guys? I'm just checking. At that point, there is something to be said for that. Looking back in Germany in the 30s and 40s, those guys had skulls all over the uniforms. It's supposed to be intimidating, like that, and that's
right. It's
and
intimidating when
granted,
you're a Viking. It's less so when you're a prick wearing thunder boots.
yeah. And to that, you're absolutely right. And that was, we see in canon several people who leave the Empire or at least question it because of that.
Yeah.
But at that point, most of the Empire who was pretty much on board for it. And not to harp on it, but we see some of this in present day where, well, yeah, we're the Death Star, but the people who are going to be dying are like, the right kind of people.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, it
many-
is.
As long as these horrible super weapons are being used against the people that we see as others, then these horrible super weapons are just fine. And there was a strong movement in the Empire that denied that Alderaan had been destroyed intentionally, that it was
Right.
a natural disaster.
Yeah.
Right. Well, but like, here's where I'm kind of floored by this, is that, again, the people who work on Star Killer base with the First Order, it's called Star Killer. Like, the whole thing is meant to be this intimidating super, and I get it. Military likes their cool sounding names. F-14 Tomcat, or F-25 Raptor. It sounds really badass.
C2 Greyhound.
Not as badass.
I know. That was my actual airplane.
But like it's like the New Republic hasn't done anything to the First Order that we know of at least from a cinematic perspective.
Right. They
Yeah.
just don't want to be in the club.
Books. Okay. But they kill 5 entire planets with Starkiller Base that have done nothing to them, that have not attacked them, that have not killed any of their people, that have done absolutely zilch to the First Order and the members thereof.
Well, what I said about people joining the Empire for good reasons, I don't think that applies to a great deal to the First Order. Most of the First Order stormtroopers we learn in the Phasma novel, as well as Aftermath. Most First Order troopers,
conditioned.
They're conscripted. They're kidnapped as infants, and they listen to First Order propaganda as they sleep from their entire childhood. As far as they're concerned, they are the only people worth saving, worth being alive. And if you don't want to be in the First Order, you're against the First Order, and so you must be destroyed.
Yeah.
It's not as interesting an antagonist, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to an hour. So what do we have next week, Garrett?
Next week, we are going to piggyback a little bit more off of what we were talking about today by discussing Grand Admiral Thrawn in more detail.
Dun, dun, dun. Very cool.
Do you think someone would be really upset if I dressed in blueface?
That is cultural appropriation, and it's not right.
The culture's going to get upset. I mean, the Chiss are fictional.
Blue Man Group.
That is offensive. I think we should all do Blue Man Group. Like, oh man, that's great.
Okay, Mark, you now have to shave your head and your face.
That's a meme right there. I've got a whole series of memes of people getting the cosplay wrong. I'll send you some, but like, it's like, oh, here's our Tuscan our Tuscan cosplay, and it's a bunch of Tuscan Raider cosplayers, and then the last guy is like in a Tuscany, Italy, like a medieval Tuscan from Italy. Like, what?
You said Tuscan.
And it's a bunch of Darth Revens, and the last one is a guy dressed as Raven from Teen Titans.
That would be awful.
And I do the same thing with Bane. Like they're all Darth Bane, and then it's Bane from Batman.
But of course, I was born in the dark. You merely adopted it.
I think that would be hilarious if they bring Bane into the main in like a movie somehow, but it is played by Tom Hardy.
Oh, that would be amazing. That would be really good. And he still does the voice.
And he still has the Bane voice.
Right, different costume, same voice. I really think that would be a lot of fun. So I do a series of fake album covers of Star Wars characters if they had a musical career, and one of my favorites is Darth Bane's debut album, Unaccompanied Minor.
Oh, jeez. So wrong. So wrong.
Anyway, with that
we
being
need to touch
said,
on Dane in the future. That's a
Yes.
lore character worth discussing.
Brian,
Well,
where
thank you guys
can
for
people
another
find you?
great show.
And
People
you're
can find
welcome.
me
Find you.
at the Sith Library and Archives on Facebook, and keep an eye out there for me. I post as Darth Carosis on Instagram as Carosis. Carosis, once again, the only thing I wrote in 8th grade that I'm still willing to admit to. So yeah, come on out there. It's a great site. We've got about 50,000 followers. We'd love for you to be one, and we share all kinds of Sith, Imperial, and just general dark sidey, baddie type stuff across the galaxy. So come see us.
You know. As for me, you guys can find me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my books and I talk about my show The Right Way, which is coming up on its new May episode this Saturday. Brian's actually going to be featured in that episode doing a very special Star Wars related top 10 book recommendations list. Great recommendations. So that episode goes live on YouTube at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find me there. Just search up GKJ Publishing on YouTube. I'm also part of another show on Feast of Fandoms called Snackame, where we eat snacks and we talk anime. And this next month, we're going to be doing an episode focused on Delicious in Dungeon, found on Netflix.
All right. As for us right here, of course, if you want to check us out, you can email us at warthestars1@gmail.com or on all other social medias. We're at warthestars77. If you want to support the show, you can go to kofi.com/warthestars, or you can check out the cool merchandise at our Spreadshirt shop. That is spreadshirt.com/war-of-the-stars. We are a proud member, as Garrett said, of Feast of Fandoms. Check out all the shows on Feast of Fandoms. They're all really cool. A lot of good guys and gals there. That about does it for this week. Join us next week again as we talk the one and only Grand Admiral Thrawn. And as always, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.